So today's topic's important because the more successful you can be at a sport like basketball, soccer, football, all those things depend on how quickly you can change direction and have the reaction time to change direction, whether it's, we just saw from the Euro 2022 tournament, I almost called it 2020, Chloe Kelly from England, how quickly she could turn that defender to score that goal or to take the shot and then have the reaction time again to get the rebound and score her goal. In football, being able to run routes and juke somebody out. In basketball, being able to, quickly get around somebody or have the reaction time to change what you need to do on the field and go to or court and go to a different place. All of those things, depend on agility and quickness. And basically how quickly you can change direction. So how do we do that? So again, why is it important? One, I mentioned performance, but also for reducing injury risk. So every time an athlete has to stop and change direction, they have to do what we call a deceleration movement. Basically, they need to apply the brakes to their body. Every time they do that, they put 6 times their body weight through that leg that they have to stop and plant on or decelerate on. And 6 times their body weight goes through in 50 milliseconds. So think of like a very, very, very short amount of time, you have a lot of force going through somebody's joints. And if you do that repeatedly, there's more and more evidence coming out that showing that can be linked to injuries. So we need to instead build the capacity for an athlete to do that. How many times during a soccer match, how many times during a basketball game, how many times during a football game, they need to build that up. We can't just throw them into a game. Anybody who's ever, like back in the day when I, was growing up, we didn't know these things. And we would always talk about, when soccer shifted from outdoor to indoor soccer season, all that quick stopping and starting because the field is smaller, how sore you were after those first couple games. And we always just kind of thought like, oh, that's the indoor soccer kind of change, on the field. And instead looking at it from the ability, from the perspective of, we need to build the capacity for somebody to do that, especially in pro athletics where they have multiple games in a season and the season schedules are very, very congested. You need to build up the ability to do that because otherwise, every time that deceleration movement happens in a game, it's going to unfortunately cause, more risk for injury, and we don't want that. So how do we train it? So as I mentioned, you have to train the brakes, you have to train the body to be able to stop and do that stopping action, but then you also have to train that explosiveness. So once they stop and plant, how quickly can you accelerate in that new direction? So we do that a number of different ways. One is different methods of strength training. So there's the traditional kind of strength training. We call that concentric strength training. That's where you're, thinking about doing a squat or doing a deadlift, at a normal kind of way you would do that. Eccentric is working things on the negative. So because we need to work kind of basically that braking motion is kind of what we call like a negative motion. Your body's trying to slow down. Doing certain strength movements that will kind of replicate that are important. Plyometric training, so jump training, working on, being able to box jumps, quick rebound jumps where you're dropping down from a box and then immediately trying to jump up to train that quick kind of reaction time, to be able to decelerate as you're landing from a jump and then re-accelerate as you're having to jump up. That helps again with change of direction on the field. Working on proper mechanics, so just looking at somebody's form and how they, breaking that down either with a video that we can slow down frame by frame, just looking at the mechanics and trying to fix those before they could put somebody at risk for injury. And the other thing is trunk control, so your core, your trunk, that kind of control. As somebody goes to decelerate and goes to plant on a leg, where the position of their core and their body in space matters. Now you can get knocked by another player, and so maybe you need to train the strength to make sure that that's not happening, because a lot of injuries happen while somebody is going to stop and change directions, and they accidentally get hit by another, or maybe on purpose by another player. And training the core to be able to better withstand those things is very important. And then, as I mentioned, gradually building that load to what's needed in game. So taking a look at the analytics of how many times is that person going to have to stop and start, and how many what we call accelerations and decelerations do they have during a game. There's, some in the higher levels of sport, we can track that, and then we know what we need to work towards for games. The last thing is improving your reaction time. So training your brain. So when you have to change direction on the field, it's in reaction to something. So the better somebody can get at making a quick decision on the field and knowing where they have to, be or change direction, the better off they're going to be. So it's that brain body connection that is the missing piece a lot of times with this. That's it for this week. See you all next week.